Jeanine Pirro thought she had the upper hand until Jasmine Crockett calmly pointed out her past judicial mistakes live on national television. You could really feel the tension in the room. The studio lights were blazing, making everything feel so tight and intense, definitely not cozy. It was a Friday night in Washington, and the Roundtable talk show was already buzzing online. Even before it wrapped up, people expected some fireworks, but they had no clue just how intense it was about to get. Sitting at the table, Jeanine Pirro had her signature sharp jawline, lips pressed together, her voice a notch louder than necessary, all while sporting her trademark red outfit. Next to her was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, dressed in a subtle charcoal blazer, hands neatly folded, her expression calm and unreadable. She radiated a quiet confidence that didn't waver in the heated atmosphere. The topic? Judicial reform. Producers were hoping for a volatile discussion, but instead, they got something far more memorable. Pirro didn't waste time. Leaning in and shooting, "Congresswoman, you've been bouncing around cable news, slamming judges left and right. Isn't that just emotional posturing?" And just like that, the first blow landed on live TV. Crockett met her eyes unflinchingly and replied softly, "With all due respect, Judge Pirro, holding judges accountable isn't emotional. It's a duty." Pirro smirked back, saying, "Your party turned accountability into a slogan. You're not offering solutions. You're just stirring the pot for social media likes." Before the host could step in, Pirro carried on, waving dismissively. "And what gives you the right to lecture on judicial ethics? You're not even on the Judiciary Committee. You're just a newcomer, aren't you? It's all just a show." That comment landed heavily, and the other panelists shifted, sensing a key moment. Backstage, the producers leaned closer to their monitors. "Captivated." Crockett stayed cool, replying evenly, "I practiced law for over 10 years, representing clients harmed by corrupt judges. I've seen lives wrecked and families shattered. That's not just performance, that's real experience." Pirro scoffed. "You say that as if it's a badge of honor," but Crockett interjected firmly, "You've been cited for misconduct 3 times while on the bench." The room froze. A gasp was heard off camera. The host blinked, and Pirro leaned back, momentarily taken aback. "Excuse me?" she asked. "You heard me?" Crockett replied, locking eyes with her. "We can pull the public records if you'd like." At that moment, the mood shifted, not just the atmosphere, but the balance of power. Pirro, once the dominant force, now seemed a bit rattled, but plowed ahead. Those were just baseless, politically motivated attacks. Crockett maintained her calm voice. "Really? Because 2 were upheld by review boards, and the 3rd was dismissed on a technicality." Pirro opened her mouth, but no words came out. The silence was almost deafening. The host finally jumped in, "Let's get back to policy." But Pirro wasn't done yet. "You're playing the victim here," she snapped. "That's what this is, using victimhood for attention." Crockett leaned in a little, her voice low but firm. "You think I'm a victim? I'm just holding those in power accountable. That's my job. It used to be yours until it wasn't." The energy in the room chilled. It wasn't an angry outburst. It was a calm reality check. Pirro fell silent, and viewers across the country paused their meals, grabbed their remotes, and rewound the moment. Yet, the exchange wasn't over. As the show cut to commercial, chaos erupted behind the scenes. Producers scrambled with headsets, giving frantic orders and waving their arms. The host shuffled papers, clearly stalling. Pirro was staring blankly, her lips pressed in a thin line, her leg bouncing under the table in frustration. Meanwhile, Crockett remained composed, hardly blinking, seemingly unaffected by the mounting tension, at least on the surface. Internally, her thoughts raced, not out of fear, but with determination. She knew this wasn't just about her. It never was. Women like her, black, bold, unapologetic, often didn't get the benefit of the doubt in these situations. Every word would be examined, twisted, dissected. But she was ready. She'd anticipated a potential detour in the conversation and knew exactly how to respond. Backstage, her comms director, Simone Randall, watched the live feed, her jaw tightening as Pirro repeated the victim card line. Simone knew Crockett would keep her cool, she always did, but she also recognized that Crockett hated being underestimated. A quick text went out to the team. "She's about to take over, watch." When the broadcast resumed, the host tried to ease the atmosphere, asking, "Let's switch to solutions. Congresswoman Crockett, can you briefly outline your proposed reforms?" Crockett nodded politely, her tone steady. "The Judicial Ethics Oversight Act we're proposing introduces mandatory disclosure rules for federal judges, tightens recusal guidelines, and creates a public, searchable database of disciplinary actions. Right now, the system protects too many repeat offenders behind closed doors. That's a real threat to justice." Pirro raised an eyebrow. "Sounds nice. But you're painting the entire judiciary as corrupt with a broad brush, Crockett replied. I'm pointing out patterns supported by data, actual rulings, and the experiences of those who can't afford high-priced lawyers. Pirro shifted, looking uneasy. And now you fancy yourself a champion of the people, she retorted. Crockett's lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile. I don't need to be anyone's champion. I'm their voice. That statement landed hard. A younger panelist, political journalist Theo Burns, let out a soft laugh, muttering damn before the director cut his camera feed. The tension in the room was palpable. It was no longer just about Pirro and Crockett. The host attempted to redirect the conversation once more, but Pirro pushed back. You act like you truly understand what serving justice means. Crockett's tone sharpened. I absolutely know what it's like. I've witnessed prosecutors falsifying transcripts, judges dozing off during hearings, and black men receiving sentences 5 times harsher than white men for the same charges. Pirro leaned in. That's inflammatory and divisive. Crockett shot back. It's documented. Look up Judge Amos Greer's sentencing records in Travis County, or check out Judge Evelyn Mark's courtroom in Wichita Falls. It's not about race until you review the data. Theo jumped in. Wait, you have those stats? Crockett nodded. I do. Want them? In an unguarded moment. Theo said, yes, please. Crockett reached under the table, pulling out a slim folder organized, tabbed, highlighted, and footnoted. She slid one page to the host, another to Theo. Let's get into the facts, she said. Here are 12 judges flagged for misconduct since 2016. 6 retired without facing penalties. 3 are still serving, and one you might know her, she used to be your colleague. Simone, watching from the green room, whispered. And now we're just getting started. But Crockett wasn't done yet. The room fell quiet again. Not quite calm, but heavy, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what Crockett would do next. Pirro hadn't said a word in almost a minute, which felt like a lifetime on live TV, especially for someone who usually dominates discussions. Crockett tapped her finger on the folder in front of her, not for show. Just a habit she picked up in courtrooms, where getting it right mattered more than being loud. The host, looking a bit flustered, tried to steer the conversation back. Let's keep this constructive. Congresswoman Crockett, what's your endgame here? Public shaming. Crockett turned to him, her expression calm. The endgame is accountability. I'm not about tearing down systems without a plan to fix them, but you can't address what you refuse to see as flawed. Theo, flipping through the documents Crockett had given him, muttered. This is serious. Some of these names haven't been in the headlines. Crockett nodded. Exactly, that's the problem. Misconduct often hides in the shadows. Finally, Pirro spoke up, her voice low and restrained. You're suggesting I personally covered up corruption. You may not be a judge anymore, but you still act like one on panels like this. Passing judgments and pretending your record is forgotten. Crockett shot back. Pirro's eyes narrowed. My record speaks for itself. Crockett pulled out a single sheet from her folder. Then let's read it out loud. Theo blinked, clearly surprised. Wait, are we actually doing this? But Crockett ignored him and read steadily. March 14, 2000. Judge Jeanine Pirro sanctioned for improper ex parte communication in State versus Delano. Judicial ethics violation warning issued. Pirro opened her mouth to protest, but Crockett continued. June 22. 2002. Judicial Conduct Board investigation into off-record remarks in chambers. Recommendation. Counseling. The host tried to jump in, but Crockett spoke softly. These aren't my inventions. They're public records, and I checked them before coming here. Just in case this went in a direction like this. Pirro sat there, frozen not out of fear, but disbelief. She had expected a debate, not this kind of cross-examination. Crockett added, It isn't personal. It's about precedent. If we're discussing ethics, everyone's records come into play. The studio director signaled the control room, Stay live. Don't cut, this is real. Backstage, Simone smiled, seeing Crockett in her element. A producer whispered, Do we have clearance on those documents? Another replied, If it's public record, we're good. Pirro finally spoke up. You came here to ambush me. Crockett held her gaze steady. I'm here to tell the truth, whether you're ready for it or not. Theo, looking shaken, said, Can we just acknowledge how unusual this is? A sitting congresswoman holding a former judge accountable on live TV, this just isn't normal. Crockett agreed. No, but maybe it should be. There was a brief silence that was so quiet, even the control room crew paused. The live audience, typically silent, broke into soft applause. Nothing loud, but definitely noticeable. It hit Pirro like a shock. Her jaw tightened, but she stayed silent. Doing nothing wouldn't save her from what was coming next. When the show went to another commercial break, the control room erupted into chaos. Producers whispered heatedly, an intern rushed to find every case Crockett mentioned, and legal teams were put on alert. The network wasn't panicking yet, but it was definitely on edge. On set, Pirro sat stiffly, lips pressed tight, eyes narrowed, calculating the fallout and what might come next. She knew the cameras would be back in just under 2 minutes, and the internet wouldn't wait. Crockett took a sip of water, looking calm. But Simone backstage noticed her subtly positioning her folder closer to the camera, signaling she was ready to dive deeper. When the broadcast resumed, the host spoke cautiously. "We're back with Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and Judge Jeanine Pirro. Let's continue this conversation about judicial accountability with clarity and fairness." Crockett didn't look at him. Her focus was entirely on Pirro. "What bothers me," she said evenly, "isn't that you disagree with me, it's how confidently you dismiss my points, as if your own foundation is untouchable." Piero's expression flickered. "You don't know me," Crockett replied. "No, but I know your record." She reached into her folder again. "I didn't come here to throw mud, but if you're going to discredit me publicly, let's lay everything out on the table." She pulled out a highlighted, annotated op-ed Pirro wrote in 2014, arguing against more oversight for state judges and claiming review boards were tools for political revenge. Crockett held it up. "This was you 10 years ago, saying judges shouldn't face scrutiny from emotional partisans. Now you criticize me for wanting transparency." Pirro leaned in. "That was a different time. I was referring to rogue actors. You were referring to a watchdog group looking into one of your colleagues. You called them an affront to judicial independence, downplaying misconduct, because it hit too close to home." Crockett countered. Pirro scoffed. "Context matters." "Exactly," Crockett said, turning to the camera and reading slowly. "Judges must be free to make tough decisions without the looming threat of politicized retaliation." Jeanine Pirro, Hudson Valley Review, 2014. She turned back to Pirro. "So tell me, what do you call it when a judge ignores DNA evidence or denies a retrial after prosecutorial misconduct? Boldness or negligence?" Pirro tried to deflect. "You're cherry-picking one editorial." Crockett slid another document forward. "There's more. Want to keep going?" Pirro didn't respond. Theo Stunned asked, "How long have you had all this?" Crockett replied, 6 months. "It's not about you. It's about the culture you represent, unchecked power and silence when it's convenient." The host shifted uncomfortably. "Let's broaden this discussion." Crockett held her ground. "The larger issue is that we've made ignoring problems normal. People like Jeanine have built careers out of deflecting scrutiny, then act shocked when someone reads between the lines." Pirro shot back. "You think you're a hero? You're just another media darling with a social media following," Crockett retorted. "I'm a woman who came prepared, and that frightens people like you." Another long silence stretched on. A producer whispered into the host's earpiece. "Let her keep talking." Ratings just doubled. Phones across the country lit up with texts, tweets, and screen recordings, and the hashtag Receipts with Crockett began trending. Simone, backstage, leaned in and whispered, "They won't recover from this." Once the cameras turned off, the atmosphere in the studio felt tense, not quite calm, but definitely not relaxed either. No one moved right away. The host, the crew, and even Pirro sat still. Crockett was busy organizing her papers, aligning them neatly without any smugness or gloating, just going through her usual routine as if everything had gone exactly as she planned. Meanwhile, Pirro remained expressionless, her microphone still attached to her blazer. With her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white, someone backstage whispered, "Is she okay?" Simone was already on the move, stepping into the shot with Crockett. "You good?" she asked, fighting back a grin. "I'm good," Crockett replied, adjusting her sleeve. "How about you?" Simone chuckled softly. "Better now." Back in the studio, the host was engaging in small talk, thanking the guests and shaking hands, keeping it all professional. Pirro gave a brief nod but kept her gaze fixed on Crockett, not out of anger, but disbelief. This wasn't how things were supposed to play out. Pirro had been in control of panels for years, steering conversations, throwing punches, and walking away with memorable sound bites. But this time, it felt less like a fight and more like a dissection, and she wasn't ready for such a harsh audience online. By the time Crockett climbed into the waiting SUV, her name was trending. Simone showed her the phone screen. 57, 0 tweets in just 20 minutes. With Crockett versus Pirro sitting at number 4, right behind an NFL trade and a reality TV feud. Crockett raised an eyebrow. "Seriously? Already?" They shared a quick laugh. But the gravity of the situation started to sink in. This wasn't merely a viral moment, it was a pivotal shift. Meanwhile, Pirro was surrounded by her team back in the studio. One staff member suggested releasing a statement, while another recommended reaching out to the network's PR. Pirro raised a hand for silence. "Don't panic," she muttered. But her flat tone gave away her nerves. A younger team member clearly rattled, exclaimed, "They're already cutting clips. It's all over the place." "Let them," Pirro responded, but she sounded resigned. In the SUV, Crockett began scrolling through the clips. One had already racked up 1.3 million views, featuring her line about being their mic, which zoomed in on Pirro's face, now a viral meme. Simone leaned closer and said, "You know what they're going to say, right? That you ambushed her." Went for the jugular. Crockett simply stared out the window. "They can say whatever they want. I didn't yell or slander. I just brought facts. They're upset because those facts didn't fit their narrative." Just then, Simone's phone buzzed with a text from a journalist. Was that real or rehearsed? It felt so precise. Simone replied, "Real. Every second of it." At the network, executives gathered not for a reprimand, but to plan their next steps. The segment had gone beyond expectations, igniting conversations across party lines, but Pirro was rattled, and Crockett, who was originally a last-minute guest, had taken over the narrative. Producer Ellis Kramer summed it up concisely. "This will be online forever." By midnight, the segment had gone viral. A political news outlet shared Crockett's clip of her detailing Pirro's ethical violations within an hour of the show airing. Bloggers, legal analysts, and meme accounts picked it up. The appeal wasn't just in the drama, but in how calmly and effectively Crockett delivered her points. One clip titled, "Read Her Respectfully," amassed 9 million views by morning. Simone's inbox flooded with requests. A Phoenix anchor, a legal podcast, an editor from The Hill, even a conservative host who tweeted, "Not a fan of her politics." But Crockett was ready. Solid work. It wasn't an outright endorsement, but respect. And in the political world, that meant something. On her flight back to Dallas, Crockett kept her phone on airplane mode for an hour, enjoying some quiet time. Simone, sitting next to her, said, "I told you it'd be huge." Crockett leaned back and replied, "It's not the huge that I'm worried about, it's what comes next." Simone sighed. The backlash. And it started rolling in. A right-leaning outlet ran a headline, "Crockett attacks Pirro with out-of-context claims. Social media cheers for rudeness." Crockett, unfazed, remarked at the baggage claim, "They're just upset that someone did their homework." But not all responses were negative. A law professor from UCLA tweeted a thread. Crockett's performance was a masterclass in informed advocacy. Legal blogs hailed it as a historic victory in cable news. Influencers created comparison videos, calling her takedown one of the most composed in years. Everyday viewers chimed in. A retired teacher from Ohio expressed feeling relief at seeing facts win out. A law student in Oregon said Crockett reignited her passion for the field. Even a conservative woman from Nebraska emailed, "I don't agree with your views, but you defended your position with facts and grace. No fake charm. I respect that." Crockett read that email 3 times at her kitchen table before shutting her laptop. "Maybe facts still matter," she said to Simone. "Maybe people are tired of just shouting." Simone nodded. "And maybe we just captured the country's attention." On Monday, Pirro walked into the Fox studio in Manhattan with her aides at her side. She looked tired, usually talkative with the crew. She headed straight to her dressing room. Her team suggested using a pre-recorded response, but she insisted, "I'll handle it live." Meanwhile, the public had already reacted. Hosts from various networks shared their thoughts. Moderate Trevor Campbell remarked, "When you accuse someone and they respond with documents, that's not an ambush. That's accountability." In Dallas, Crockett's Monday was different. Her district office was busy with constituents and supporters. By 8 a.m., her staff reported 35 interview requests. Crockett focused on what mattered, saying, "Schedule only what counts." She met people one by one, shaking hands. An elderly man showed her a transcript printout for his granddaughter who aspired to be a lawyer. He said, "She wants to sound like you." Crockett smiled and replied, "Tell her to keep going, even when they talk over her." In Washington, aides noted her growing influence. An anonymous Democrat told Roll Call she's in a new orbit. But there was also hate. She received voicemails with slurs and threats, including one that mentioned a rope. Simone shared the most disturbing ones with Capitol Police. Still, Crockett remained composed. "I didn't go on that show for likes. I went to call out what we've ignored. If truth brings hate, we've got work to do." Later, at a Dallas courthouse, she met with local judges. Judge Leland Pratt voiced his worries about public trust. Crockett responded, "The public already distrusts the judiciary. I'm naming the problem." A younger judge, Marisol Quintana, agreed. "You said what we're too cautious to admit." That night, on her porch, Crockett passed up an MSNBC invite to take a moment to breathe. But she wasn't slowing down. By the end of the week, Crockett had transformed from a rising star in Texas to a national figure not for seeking the spotlight, but for her steadfast stance. Her clash with Pirro quickly became material for late-night comedy and political cartoons, portraying her as a composed chess player while Pirro struggled with a flipboard. She wasn't interested in the accolades. Her focus was on making a difference. On Dallas Morning Live, she unveiled a companion bill alongside Senator Hal Whitner, aimed at federal judicial misconduct reporting. The host called it ambitious, and Crockett simply stated, "Accountability always is." Georgetown Law even invited her to give a lecture on ethics rather than confrontation. An op-ed labeled her as a performer, but she brushed it off with a quip. "Remind me what decade we're in?" During a grassroots town hall in Baltimore, someone asked how she maintained her calm demeanor. "I didn't want a moment," Crockett said. "I wanted a point." She was looking for a headline. I offered her a mirror. The audience's applause was not over the top, but it resonated with respect. Later, Simone asked her, "Do you realize what you've accomplished?" Crockett replied, "Jeanine hasn't. Her silence speaks volumes." Back in DC, the vibe at the Capitol was different. There were curious, cautious, and respectful looks exchanged. Her office was alive with energy, not chaos. Simone laid out the updated Judicial Ethics Oversight Act 2, which included tougher penalties and rules for public disclosure. "You sure we're ready?" Simone asked. "Not really," Crockett replied, "but we can't keep waiting." They set their sights on a public hearing, hoping to gather bipartisan support. At a legal roundtable in St. Louis, Crockett told the students, "Change happens when you document things and create pressure that can't be ignored." One student raised a question about burnout. "You can't take on the whole system," she advised. "Pick your battles, speak the truth, and outlast the silence." During the hearing in DC, victims came forward to share their stories of wrongful convictions and judges who faced no consequences. Teresa Nix talked about her brother, who's still behind bars. While his judge enjoyed a comfortable retirement, Crockett listened closely, which was the point of it all. Pirro finally made some comments on her show, sidestepping Crockett's name and concentrating on judicial independence. Crockett caught the segment and shrugged it off. Let her say what she wants. We've got legislation to push forward. When a reporter asked her about running for Senate, she said, "I'm not after titles. I'm focused on getting results." Months went by, and while the moderator's name and Pirro's exact words slipped from memory, Crockett's folder, her calm demeanor, and those thoughtful pauses stayed with people. Her bill passed the House by a narrow margin, calling for greater transparency and access to judicial reprimands. When it was signed, President O'Connell handed her the pen and remarked, "This matters." Crockett celebrated in her own way with her staff. Enjoying some takeout on a rooftop in DC, Theo Burns texted her, dubbing her moment the cleanest checkmate. She responded, "Checkmate isn't the goal, balance is." Her impact grew. Candidates began to mention her. Law students studied her approach, and nonprofits featured her footage. In Dallas, a muralist painted her likeness, sitting with her folder, listening. Her nephew asked, "Is that you?" To which she replied, "That's what doing your homework looks like." The takeaway wasn't about being loud. It was about being prepared, leading when things got tough, and standing firm quietly. Crockett didn't chase after a moment of glory, but by speaking the truth with calmness, she provided something the nation needed, not a savior, but someone who was ready. If you find this resonates with you, share it. And if you believe in the importance of truth, preparation, and quiet resistance, consider subscribing. Stories like this are worth remembering. Alo.